Om Shanti. Good evening. Welcome to Raj Yoga Essentials. And as always, it's nice to start with a reflection. So I invite you to be seated comfortably, but well supported in your chair. And allow a moment or two for the body to settle into the space, to physically feel things slowing down. And then take that feeling of slowing down deeper and deeper inside, feeling the mind start to slow down, the thoughts becoming less rushed, less forced, less impatient. And as I slow down inside, the space between thoughts become more pronounced and not empty, but filled with a sense of calm. As if that peace is the glue between my thoughts. And coloring my thoughts. So my thoughts are becoming less and less ordinary and more sacred, focusing more and more on what really matters. Allowing the unnecessary, the details, to slip through the fingers of my mind, like sifting sand for gold. Until only the gold remains in the hands of my mind. Reflections that are truly valuable. And in speculating on what's really of value, that's where the journey towards change begins. Om Shanti. Warm welcome again. As always, we invite you at any time during this roughly 45 minute session, if you have any questions or thoughts, to type them into the chat box online, and we will be able to view those and respond to those. So Raj Yoga, the essence or the real basics of it, always there's two questions when we look at something like that: is what is it and why is it? What is the purpose of it? And the purpose we focus on always is peace and happiness. So it's going to be obviously include a reframing of our approach to peace and happiness. We have our own ideas of how to secure peace and happiness, and When we find that's not working out well, we look for a different method. So, Raj Yoga, a spiritual approach towards peace and happiness. So, that's the why. Itself means Raj, self sovereignty, and yoga, union or connection or link. So, this will be using the elements of self mastery and relationship in order to move towards peace and happiness. So the three elements that it turns out are deeply linked to peace and happiness. Every single human being, these three elements are so important. And one way or the other, we eventually have to face these three things. The first is, who am I? My identity of self. It's the foundation for everything, of course. My sense of self. The second is, who do I belong to? Which provides my sense of value. And the third is, what is going on? Which provides my sense of purpose or action. What should I do? So these three things are the essence of life. Who am I? My sense of self. Who do I belong to? My sense of value. And what is going on? What should I be doing? The point or purpose of my life. And if I can sort these things out, depending on how I work with them, they can either lead to peace and happiness or in the opposite direction. We feel that the answer to these three things cannot rest on temporary foundations. It can't depend on temporary things. And everything that is physical is temporary. So, in answering those three questions, I am not going to use temporary responses. What does a temporary response look like? Well, for example, who am I? To think I am the body. The body is temporary, it's perishable, it will only be in this form for a short term. Or who do I belong to? This is huge in the world. I remember being a teenager, perhaps you also remember, and this idea of belonging was huge. I was at one point at a school where, I won't say gangs, but groupings were very pronounced. And you could really feel this sense of belonging was so deeply intertwined with a sense of self-value. That value, really feeling valued. It is deep, very, very deep, this belonging. So those two together really form something critical called self-respect. Who am I? Who do I belong to? And if self-respect is based on temporary things, there's a problem. So peace and happiness will always, always elude me if that self-value, that sense of self and that sense of value, self-respect or self-worth, if it's based on external temporary things, peace and happiness will not be possible or stable. And then the third one, what do I need to do? Once the self-respect is in place, the self-identity and that self-value, once that's in place, what I have to do becomes obvious. And so we use the word often self-responsibility. It becomes very obvious what the right thing to do is once I have self-respect. But if my sense of self and value is based on temporary things, I'm always going to be running after those temporary things because they're defining my sense of self and my value, my doing will be filled just with running after those temporary things. It's like running after a shadow. It will just elude me. And so I'll start to do some very interesting things that actually reduce my sense of value, compromise my core values, and also actually don't acknowledge self responsibility. And self responsibility is deeply intertwined with something called the law of karma, or cause and effect, that every action I perform has a consequence. I am creating my own life through my own activities. If I'm not able to pay attention to that law because I'm so busy running after elusive forms of peace and happiness, what am I creating? The law is still in effect, but I'm not acknowledging it really, right? I'm every action I perform is so self-absorbed, right? I just want to take through every action. So it gets quite intense, actually. These three elements: who am I? Who do I belong to? Defining self-respect. And what do I need to do? That sense of responsibility, that sense of performing actions that aren't so much taking value from the world, but rather giving value, operating from my core values, giving value to the world. So, what will I create then? So, breaking down each of these so that I do have true self respect, and my actions are no longer about taking, but actually almost become forms of serving. How will that be possible? Because happiness and peace are at the end of that equation. A soul who has self respect and is able to perform benevolent actions with pure intentions will absolutely be peaceful and happy. But a soul who does not have self respect and performs every action just to take that value from the outer world will never really know true peace or happiness. So it's pretty important giving that every waking moment, unconsciously or consciously, is dedicated to securing peace and happiness for the self. So let's look at what Raj Yoga proposes in response to those three elements and see if we can experience them. The first one, who am I? This idea that I am not temporary things. So we already identified one earlier, the biggie, thinking I'm the body. That's the biggie. Everything else actually is relative to that anyway. So if you just address that one, you pretty much have covered everything else. So thinking I am the body. Now, I don't think I need to convince you. I think you probably already know this body is temporary. We use the term die. It's not really an accurate term, but it suggests that there is a finite period to this body in the state which it currently exists. So if I think I am this body, I am saying I am temporary. And that's a fairly disturbing consciousness to have about the self. So we try and come up with different workarounds for that. Well, I am the body, but I have an afterlife, or I am the body, but I have a soul, or I am the body, but then other things are going to happen to me, or I'll rise. We come up with crazy, and avoid the most obvious thing that maybe I'm not the body, the most obvious thing. But when I think I am the body, I create a whole structure, very complicated structure of temporary supports. So, by virtue of being this body, I have certain relationships. They're all temporary too, because it's through the body. So, I have all these different temporary relationships. By virtue of being this body, I have a certain image that's temporary too, because it's by virtue of being this body. So, my entire sense of self, by virtue of thinking I'm this body, is built on very, very shifting sand. And thinking I'm the body also means I'm deeply pulled by the senses, the physical senses of this body. So that also further erodes the sense of self. I become quite reactive by what I see and I hear and I taste and I say, and very reactive. And it's not that the sense organs are bad. They actually are a remarkable feedback system. So if my hand is going for a hot element, it will give me feedback that that's probably not a good idea. But when they start to control me rather than be a very loyal feedback system or really serve me, but they control me, that's a very dysfunctional dynamic where that which I am supposed to be a master of is now controlling me. So if I don't feel I am these temporary things, if I'm not these temporary things, if I'm not the body, then who and what am I? This is where Raj Yoga begins. The idea of being a Raj, a sovereign, a self-sovereign. So we suggest or remind ourselves that I am the being inside this body. Even the term human being, human or humus, matter, and being, the living being inside this body, expressing through this body. So let's take a moment to explore that idea. Sitting comfortably one more time. And in just a second, I become aware of this body. I actually can look at it through the physical eyes because it's physical, and I can see its form, I can see its outline, and through other sensations become aware of more subtle activities of the body, the lungs, breathing, etc. So I am able to observe this body. But the question is, who am I, the one observing? I can even tell this body to do things like move the hand, but who am I sending that direction? So beginning to experience the sense of me, the observer, the one who is thinking, the one who is giving directions to the body, listening through the ears. Who am I? And I am the life force, the life in this body. If I am not in this body, the body will fall down and it won't feel anything. It becomes just matter, non-living matter. So the sense of there's me and there is this living costume I'm wearing, expressing through the body. And I am the thinker. I am the one that is feeling. I am the one expressing, observing. I am the one that's self-aware. And the feeling that all of those activities of thinking, observing, being aware, they all seem to originate from behind the forehead. That feeling that that's actually where I am residing or sitting. And the body is dangling down below. But this real sense of self, and it's almost as if feeling the energy that I had spread out through the body, the energy of the self, if you will, the awareness of the self, it's starting to draw up and concentrate into a single point that is me. Me, the one who is animating this body, feeling that sense of self, all the energy of the self, withdrawing, concentrating into a single point that I am behind the forehead, observing through the eyes. this very precise, concentrated experience of the self. I can't be seen with the physical eyes, but I do feel my own presence. I feel my nature. I feel the subtle activity of thinking, observing, listening. I exist. I'm a point of life. I'm just not physical. I am, as energy, living energy, eternal. So I do not die. But there will come a time when I will leave this body, when the body will perish, and me, the eternal being, I will continue my journey through time, taking rebirth. By letting go of the temporary, something magical happens. You would think it would be scary to think I am the body, but fear actually comes when we think we're the body, and when we let go, there is no fear. There's just a sense of calm. The moment I experience there is me, the being, the soul, and I am separate from the body, there is a sense of peace that comes naturally, as if I have returned to a true experience of myself and my true nature of peace. All the details fall away. So huge, I'd say 90% of, at least in the beginning, our time with this study is just establishing that new relationship between me and the body, that I am separate. There's me, the eternal being, and the body that I express through. And really starting to experience the self as a soul and that very peaceful nature of the self that seems to come automatically when I give time to remembering. And it seems that things that used to pull me so much don't pull me less and less if I am honestly practicing soul consciousness, the experience of being a soul. Many just think about it and expect results, but they don't experience it. Again, it's this irony of fear of letting go of the body, but actually the fear comes from holding on to the body. So I have to be honest in what I'm doing. And that allows us to move into the next piece, which is very critical for that self-value. Who do I belong to? This is really where one gets a sense of their true value. And the answer that we explore in Raj Yoga is I am a child of God. I belong to the Supreme Soul. And this is a being who really stays constantly in the highest stage of the soul. So there's just this constant demonstration of the highest stage of being a soul. And they just stay in that stage all the time. We call it ever pure. They never, this being, the Supreme Soul, God, the Father of souls. So we use the term Baba, meaning Father. This being never becomes prone to anger or peacelessness or insecurity or jealousy or comparison or worry or all these other all of these other very heavy vibrations that come to us when we forget ourselves, staying in a very elevated, very pure place. The moment that I say, I belong to that one, it's amazing how our sense of self and value is shaped by whatever we choose to belong to, whether it's a club or a company or a person or a thing. It really shapes our value. To say that I belong to such a valuable, majestic being, that I am the child of that one, I actually have rights over that one. Incredible what it does to our sense of self-worth. And even though perhaps in our conscience or even our heart, we might be carrying baggage of mistakes we've done in the past, regrets we have. When we say that we belong to ourselves, it starts to open the possibility that I am not innately bad. That I'm sort of fighting against some sort of innate wrongness. But it starts to remind us I'm a child of that one. It starts to remind us of our own original pure state. And then things must have happened over time, but our original state as a child of that one is also very elevated, very pure, very majestic, very royal. So the yoga part of Raj Yoga is to belong to that. We use the word remember, which means member means to belong, to be a member of. So to belong to that one again, to be reminded by linking, by remembering that being, linking with that being, feeling the beauty of that being, it actually brings me back in line with my own beauty, my own greatness, by belonging to that one. And that one again is a soul, a tiny point of life and light. So let's explore that experience for a moment. In 1 second, I remember I am a soul. It's like discovering I'm a different species from what I thought I was. I am the one experiencing inside this body a tiny point of awareness, of consciousness, of life. I am spiritual energy, eternal and living. Spiritual meaning all the values are concentrated within me. I play a part through this body, and so what happens is I forget myself over time. And in the act of forgetting, my sense of self, my character drastically changes. I start to become uncertain, even arrogant at times. There are desires, and emptiness starts to develop in the self. But when I remember I am a soul, I also start to remember other aspects of myself. My true home, which isn't physical, but a beautiful state of silence, deep, deep peace. This is why peace is always so nourishing and soothing to the soul, to the self. And in that state of deep, deep peace, I reside with my eternal parent, the Father of all souls, the Supreme Soul, the one who is ever pure, ever beautiful, ever peaceful. When I remember these aspects about myself. It literally elevates my sense of self, aligns me with what is eternal and true, changes my consciousness, my vibration, and all the baggage of the past starts to just melt away. I am becoming my own pure, original self, real. The more time I can spend in that silence, in that connection to my true spiritual Father, the one to whom I eternally belong, the more real I will feel, the more myself. The illusions and the image and the baggage will start to naturally fall away. And what is the result of that? Well, we are in bodies performing actions, and it's what we're meant to do, and it's a glorious thing to be able to do, to act and interact, to express and have relationships. It's wonderful. But what makes them really beautiful is when I do them in the stage of my true self. A pure soul is so amazing. All the qualities that we strive after, that we glorify, the compassion, the kindness, the love, the truth, the integrity, all of those are very natural when we are pure. And to be able to bring those into action and interaction is the basis of a beautiful world, a beautiful life. Every act I perform will create something beautiful in my future. So that's, life isn't meant to be just a game of survival where we get on a treadmill and just keep running and running and running like a hamster. It's meant to be really sacred. Every moment worthwhile and sacred and creative, not destructive. And so when I am truly myself, pure, real, authentic, and I maintain that sense of self, which is very, very peaceful, very content as I come into action. So I don't take through action, but I have all these values inside that I share through my actions. I will create such a beautiful life. I will, of course, be happy. I, of course, will be peaceful. And I actually will create a wave of happiness and peace in the world for others too. That's a beautiful purpose. I remember coming to this study and feeling very loudly in the first lessons that the purpose, just being a peaceful person, a happy person, is a wonderful purpose for life. In fact, I'd say it's the most sought after occupation in the world is peaceful, happy people. To play that part, especially now, is a wonderful part to play. So knowing really what I have to do is simply act in this world in alignment with my true pure self. I can still be doing my work and doing all other things. It's just now I'm operating from a pure place. As long as I remember who I am and remember who I belong to, what that does to my sense of self and the value, the greatness of the self, if I can keep that feeling as I come into action, I will create a better life for myself, but also contribute to a better world. So that is Raj Yoga in a nutshell. I'm going to stop and see if there's any questions or comments that you wish to ask or share. It looks like there is not. So I'm going to leave you with just some reflective ideas. Won't even call it meditation, just some ideas to think about and reflect on and experiment with for yourself. Is to really kind of contrast. The first idea, contrast what happens to me when I think I am this body. What sense of self does that create? How does that feel? And then what happens to me when I think I am the soul, this being, this subtle being of light, eternal? What sense of self does that create? How does that feel? And to contrast the two. Not that I have a soul. That's not what I'm saying, that you are a soul. You have a body. So that's the first exercise or experiment, is to contrast those two. The second experiment, this idea of belonging to God, to the divine, to this being who is ever pure. And to think that this being is a soul as well. Very important. What we've done is we have projected our own physicality onto God, saying that he is judgmental or, I don't know, completely whimsical, that we have to please him, that he makes everything move, that he's everywhere. So to reflect on this idea that God is not all over the place and he's not a human being, and but that this being who resides beyond in a state of beautiful silence, a very, very subtle, invisible point of spiritual living energy, a being who is not physical. And contained within that being are all virtues, all wisdom, complete benevolence, and that this being is egoless. Starting to move outside of projecting our own sense of self, trying to clear that web aside, and the sense of what really is the personality of that being who is so pure, whose heart is so pure, and I belong to that being. So really having to have a very fresh approach to understanding God. And what is the importance of belonging to that one? To reflect on that. And the third, of course, yes, mostly about law of karma. What am I creating through every thought, every word, and every deed? As I go through the day, do I understand that whatever is happening isn't happening to me? It's happening because of me. I've created. So really starting to take care with my thoughts, words, and deeds. What is it like? What would it look like as a child of God to move through the world? How would I see others? So really trying to go deeply for yourself into these three aspects. Until we meet again, we have run out of time. Thank you for joining. A reminder that our next public program is drop-ins on Saturday. So we have Experience 1 o'clock to 1:45 on this YouTube channel. And then 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, we have Inner Fitness, and that's in Zoom. So you'd have to go to our website to get the link. So you're most welcome to join. Om Shanti.